Hypes. I'm back, and I am so excited to introduce this phenomenal woman to you all today. Now, today I have the honor of getting into a little climate girly scoop with the one and only Dr. Takora Jones. Now, let me put y'all up on game about Dr. Jones real quick. Okay, Dr. Jones, she that girl, period. Not only did she graduate from MIT, period, but she earned her doctorate degree in polymer science and engineering from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Okay, put it on there. Dr. Jones is currently the new Chief Science Officer of NRDC. So without further ado, you know how us hypes get down. Let's holla at Dr. Jones. Hey, Dr. Jones.
Hey, AB, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
How you feeling today? Because you're looking fabulous.
Oh, thank you, thank you. It is great to be here with you. It's great to talk to the hypes. It's a good day. The pollen is doing a little too much though, but aside from that, we're fine.
One thing pollen gonna do is pollen, okay? And let me tell you, anybody who live in Georgia, they know how that pollen get down. So it could get real aggressive. It start assaulting people early on in the season.
Truly, truly. Too much Benadryl, Zyrtec, a whole bunch of things have just been happening in my life these last couple of days.
Baby, well, we gonna be at the heights. We gonna put you in prayer, okay? We're gonna get
Thank
you in
you.
prayer. I am excited to get into this interview with you. One thing I'm excited because I was a little late to the whole climate girly conversation and all that kind of stuff. I didn't really learn about it much until I got my master's degree, and President Obama was the speaker, and he like went into depth about like how we was having some climate issues, right? I'm from the hood, so we don't really normally talk about stuff like that, at my kitchen table anyway.
Mhm.
So my first question to you is, how did you even get into the field of science?
So I was that kid who was just curious, like all kids are. Like, what is this? Why is this? How is this? And my dad bought me a chemistry set when I was 10. And I loved it. I just love being able to experiment. I love being able to try new things. I thought I was going to be a chemical engineer or a chemist when I grew up. And just really appreciating that the whole world is there and you can observe so much. And like, honestly, little kids, from the time that they can start really kind of messing with their environment, they're doing their own little science experiments. Like, if I put this in my mouth, is somebody going to come for me? Will it taste good? Will it not? Why are you trying to feed me broccoli again? I told you I didn't like this. You've done that experiment. I've told you what the results are. Like, we all have it within us. It's just a matter of whether you are encouraged to pursue it further. So as I was coming up, they didn't call it STEM or STEAM or STREAM or the many different acronyms that there are now.
Yeah.
But I was really fortunate to get involved in research programs when I was in high school. I did research at Morehouse College the summer before I went to my junior year of high school, did research at Duke, where my parents are in North Carolina, and just really was very fortunate to have these kinds of opportunities to really explore science in a way that was focused primarily in a lab. It wasn't necessarily outside like a lot of people might be doing more environmental science now.
Right.
But, was just really fortunate to have a family that supported my love of exploration.
I love that. See, I told y'all, Dr. Jones is that girl, baby. Okay. And speaking of which, so I did, my little intro, we found out that you are the new Chief Science Officer of NRDC.
Really new, yes.
I love it. So for those of us that aren't put up on game about NRDC, would you mind just explaining what NRDC is and kind of the role that you play within the organization?
Sure. So NRDC, or the natural, because the natural is important, Resources Defense Council is focused on protecting planet for people. And so as we do that, it's looking at the different ways that we are advocating around new legislation. It's around how we are supporting different regulations that are coming out, or saying, hey, we actually need to make those stronger. It's looking at how we essentially are doing the best we can with the resources we have to protect the planet that we've got. Because as we've seen in the climate marches, there's no planet B. Like, this is all we've got. And so you want a set of people, whether those are just lawyers, there's a lot of lawyers here, scientists, a solid number of scientists, advocates, and other campaign people who are focused on that intersection of how we bring together science and law and advocacy and policy and programs to say, no, we want better for our planet. That's what we've been doing. I mean, some of your hypes might have heard about all the things that have happened in Flint, Michigan around lead in drinking water. And that's actually one of the things that NRDC is relatively well known for, being part of the legal team that helps sue to get the lead out of the drinking water in Flint, and really being there and being present around that. So it's not just clean water or clean air, it's more than that. But I have the privilege of being the chief science officer at this moment. And part of what I'm doing is making sure I support all of the scientists across the organization. There are lots of different kinds of scientific disciplines that happen, whether it's like soil scientists or people who care about the bees, because the bees are important.
Yeah.
Or people who are looking at the efficiency of renewable energy. There's all sorts of different kinds of folks who are out there doing analysis, doing research, asking questions. And my job is to make sure that they are supported and that we can talk about that work with a lot of different kinds of people.
I love it. See, and y'all got a lot going on. You put me up on some games and stuff I didn't even know. Okay. Now politics and law, that's kind of my thing, right? And you got a little comprehensive, well, not even a little, a lot of comprehensive knowledge about what's going on in politics, I'm sure, especially when it comes to this Inflation Reduction Act. So my next question to you, can you explain the Inflation Reduction Act kind of in your own words with a little
sauce.
hot
So,
sauce?
I mean, honestly, it is the most significant investment in climate that we've been able to make as the US society in ever. But what's interesting to me is, like, I moved to DC in 2008 because I thought I was going to work on climate. There was a presidential election happening. We were excited about what was possible. And like, there was just energy in the air. I don't know if any of your girlies, your hypes, watched West Wing. I have no idea what your age demographic, but if you watched West Wing and that was like your jam and you were like, government, that's part of the energy that I felt when I was coming to DC in 2008. And so when I came, I was fortunate. I did a science policy fellowship. I was working on the Hill for a year in a senator's office. He's no longer a senator, but Senator Russ Feingold. And we were working on things related to energy and environment, but there was a lot of energy in 2008 around climate and what we could do. There was also an economic crisis, and there was also the expectation that, oh, wait, maybe we should do something about healthcare. And so while legislation did move in 2008 on climate, it only moved in the House. And as your political folks know, you kind of have to have the House and the Senate working together. Like there's usefulness in that. That didn't happen in 2008. It happened for health, but it didn't happen for climate. And so that was like the last really huge opportunity we had there. And then the 2010 elections happened. And as you and folks may recall, some things changed. After this new election, I went to the federal government after that. After the 2020 election, when there was so much pressure from so many folks about like, hey, our climate, we need to do something to protect it. We need the federal government to be on the front lines to help us protect our climate. NRDC and a whole bunch of other environmental NGOs were on the front lines of really galvanizing people, getting the advocates together to pass this kind of legislation. Now you hear Inflation Reduction Act, you're like, what exactly does that have to do with climate? So many things, but it was named in a way that it makes you feel like, no, that has nothing. What? Who? How? So, there's legislation and programs that are focused on renewable energy, because the solar panels, they're not going to install themselves. The wind turbines are also not going to install themselves. There's things focused on continuing to clean up water and reduce air pollution. You said you live somewhere where wildfires happen. Is that true?
Los Angeles, California, baby.
Right, right. So the particulates in the air, I don't know about you, but last summer I felt a way about how I couldn't breathe terribly well and the sky
Mm.
was orange and it looked like an entire like horror movie was happening.
Mhm.
Right. You want to be able to do the kinds of things that reduce the harm, the soot, the particulates that are in the air, not just from wildfires, but from plants that are essentially trying to produce power. Like, how are we holding industries accountable for how they're producing power and how they are actually part of either harming or protecting the planet? These are questions. Then there's like electric vehicles are in there. I almost like when all of this was going down in 2008, there was really only one electric vehicle company. Now,
Mhm.
everybody's in the electric vehicle game. We need more chargers across the US to continue to make that sustainable, but we are in a fundamentally different place now. So electric vehicles in there, solar is in there, heat pumps are in there, rebates for actually making your home more energy efficient. There's all sorts of stuff that's in that bill. But the thing that's important to remember is that like when you're passing laws at the national level, you actually have to cascade them into reality as it relates to programs and policies that are put forward.
Mhm.
And that means moving things to the states. I don't know how much you talk to your folks about what happens when stuff moves to the states, and depending on what color those states are, what ultimately happens there.
Oh, yes. We have quite the
But
conversations.
this is where we need folks to help their own governments be accountable for the investments that are coming towards them. Because it's not as if the folks who are on the Hill, who are representatives, who shall remain nameless, it's not as if they're not touting the investments that are coming to their communities without
Mhm.
actually voting for them.
Mhm.
Now is the time to actually help people be accountable for the investments that are coming, that are cascading down from the federal level. So like there's levels and layers to it, but there's so much investment that is coming. There's investments coming to environmental justice. Like the Justice 40 and the entirety of that program expects that like 40% of these investments are supposed to come to communities that have been overburdened and under resourced for all of this time. Environmental racism is a thing.
Yes.
While people may not actually have a whole bunch of conversations around their kitchen table about environmental racism as a whole,
Mhm.
I'm sure you talk about why is there, mm, oh, manufacturing and chemical plants down the street from me or down the way from me or down from grandma or grandpa or whomever that is actually polluting my environment.
Mhm.
Why? Oh, oh, I wonder why.
Mm.
Sorry.
Mm. Mm.
I'm sorry.
Speak to
I'll
him.
come back to you.
Look, speak to him, doctor. Speak
Or
to him.
not. But like, how do you make sure you correct for all of those harms that have been done? And so Justice 40 is part of doing that. But again, it is about how you hold the entire system accountable.
Mhm.
Victories at the national level only go so far if they're not cascading into places where folks are ready to hold people accountable. And that's what we want. There's an American Climate Corps that's focused within this bill that hopefully will provide 50,000 jobs per year by
Mhm.
2031 that are clean tech jobs.
Mm.
That's a different set of opportunities. While your viewers may not be in coal country, there's still wind farms that may be set up or solar installations that may be set up or any number of other things, charging stations that need to be installed and maintained. The infrastructure that we have as a whole is something that must be maintained and should be maintained in part through the tax dollars that we spend at the federal and state levels, federal, state, and local levels. Yay.
I Okay, look, she gave us all the tea. And I love it. I love it because I've been trying to just stress to the audience like it's a lot going on with this Inflation Reduction Act, and I don't know why we're not talking enough about it. Okay.
And let's be honest, it takes time. I worked for 14 years inside the federal government. And the time that it takes to get money from Congress to actually get it through the programming process, you're creating grants, you're creating accountability mechanisms, you're making new rules. All of this takes time.
Mhm.
And that's part of the challenge. Like, this isn't like the government has a credit card and we can go to whatever your favorite store is and like purchase and it's here and it's ready to go. You actually have to build the infrastructure. And when you're building the infrastructure or plugging into the existing infrastructure, like none of that is plug and play. It's not like the
Mhm.
iPhone that you purchase that as soon as you plug it up, it's ready to go. No, this is a whole lot more complicated than that. And it's hard to be patient, but like, how are people getting involved? How are they becoming accountants and grants managers and all of these other things within organizations to help hold these systems accountable? It's important.
I'm just giving us game, baby, giving us, okay.
Hey,
She
I'm
lacing
trying,
our
I'm trying, I'm
boots.
trying.
So you brought up something too I want to touch a little bit on, because I got my audience, we're a little urban, okay? And one thing growing up in LA, right, it's a lot of smog out there. And we don't have very many trees. And something, I learned about most recently was like these things called urban heat islands and things like that, right? And I was curious because I'm like, what got me into it is realizing how many of the people I grew up with had asthma and stuff like that, right? And I was like,
Precisely.
oh, this starting to click. So you touched on it a little bit earlier about like, oh, why do you think they put in certain stuff in certain neighborhoods? What I want to ask you or want to dig into if you can is like, can you kind of go into a little bit more like the health impacts that our current
Yeah.
climate crisis is happening, especially on minorities in like these lower income communities?
So the thing is that, like, just because somebody may not live downstream from a plant that is producing a whole bunch of smog, and just because you might not be able to see it, doesn't mean that you aren't adversely impacted by it. Because if we go back to the wildfires, like, how far away were they? And how much could you actually see the particulates that were like running around in the air?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but you could feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this notion of how close we are in proximity to different smog, different pollutants, all of these other different elements that are in the air based on what's being manufactured. How do we do things like say, you know what, we're going to regulate how much you can put into the air that is harmful to our human health? So there was a new regulation that EPA just cleared that was focused on reducing the size of the particulate. Because as I said, just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it can't potentially harm you. So they've just reduced the size of the particulates that they are regulating on so that we can have cleaner air for all of us. But asthma happens in our communities in ways that are fundamentally different because of the heat islands, because of the manufacturing, because we don't have the trees doing the work of essentially processing the carbon dioxide and giving us better oxygen. Like, all of those things happen on urban heat islands in ways that they don't happen in more rural communities. So when you got a whole bunch of people together, all that concrete, the concrete jungles are hot. And what are the ways that we're investing in communities to regreen spaces or bring additional kind of cooling types of low technology to the communities that we are in? Did you know that if you paint roofs white, that actually can help reduce the amount of heat that's being absorbed by a city? That's a very low tech solution, but everything doesn't have to be about high tech. Some of it is about natural solutions. Some of it is about just changing the ways that we operate. Some of it's about energy efficiency and having more efficient homes so that we're not using so much energy. All of those things are really relevant for urban communities, and how we essentially set our buildings up so that they are places that don't make us sick is also important.
Yeah, I heard that right. I'm in class today, y'all. We having classes in session. Let me ask you this too. And this kind of piggybacking off the previous question a little bit. What are some ways that you've noticed or like you could call out about how we as humans, just everyday people, have contributed to the current state of climate change today?
Well, car culture as a whole. What would have happened if oil were never discovered? And then how we essentially live our lives in a much more expanded fashion than our ancestors might have lived their lives. But that's not just about human behavior, that's also about profitable behavior for people who are not humans. Little things. And so, in terms of the things that we do, I was actually listening to this podcast like a week ago, and I was talking about how we as humans right now are having issues living our lives at multiple scales at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because of platforms like social media, we feel like we are connected to people all the way around the world. But at the same time, how much time are we spending connecting with one another, like day to day in person?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so much easier to be like, oh, I have whoever I want to talk to in my pocket,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not continuing to cultivate the very human and local connections that continue to create fulfilling lives for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the way that that connects with this question of like human behavior, human interactions. I always like saw this bumper sticker when I was like kid through like later, think globally, act locally.
Mm-hmm.
It's still the same kind of concept,
Mm-hmm.
but we are living a digitized life at scale. And how can we find ways to get back to things that are tangible and visceral in very different ways?
Mm-hmm.
So, like farmers, local farmers, our ability to access those kinds of things. Other human behaviors, I know we like to shop, but all of this fast fashion,
Right.
kind of not good for the planet, y'all. Like, as much as I love a good, quick outfit, I've cut back on the kinds of things that I'm like, no, but I need to have this now. Do I really?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I just shopping to fill a void that could actually be fulfilled by human connection?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went a little woo woo on you, but like, let's be honest, the
Keeping it
ways in
real.
which we are living right now, there's certain amounts of it that are just not sustainable. And thinking critically about how we consume, and not just how we consume, how we expect the corporations around us to consume, and how we are accountable within that these are very different kinds of questions to address.
Mm-hmm.
And how we connect in community, I think, can change how we perceive a future for us in this changing climate, because we're going to have to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as if things aren't changing already. Like, my kid is not going to have the same number of snow days that I had. Now,
Right.
granted, we are growing up in two different places, but she's not.
Right.
Spring is going to look a little bit different for her year over year because it's looked different for me. What am I doing to help teach her about the environment that she lives in, how to protect it, how much we're consuming, how to think about that differently, um, and how we can be better stewards of the planet that we have, but not just as individuals, as a collective, how we can be better stewards and expect different from the many different corporations that we engage with. Because are they always interested in being good stewards of the planet? Mm, mm. Another story for another time.
We're gonna make sure we schedule that time because we're gonna get into that. I got some things to say about that. Okay.
But like the other notion of like our consumption and our expectation that we'll always have strawberries in season, we'll always have whatever in season. Like, our grandparents didn't have that.
Right.
There were very different ways at interacting with the natural world and what was available to us at that time. And everything wasn't, I want it now and I can have it now.
Right.
So how do we change that for ourselves?
And so let's dig into that a little bit more, right? Because this conversation, or as you were talking, like, I heard you touch on things about like togetherness and like how we as a culture are changing, right? We as a society. And then also earlier when we were talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and kind of like not all these changes can be instantaneous, right? It does take time.
Yeah.
But I think, there are some things that we can achieve now and some things we can do now to achieve our goals. So what I kind of want you to touch on, if you don't mind,
Mhm.
is what would be your suggestions or some ways, you can suggest to us as a community so that we can work together and start actually achieving climate progress.
So I think, one of the ways is looking broadly for accountability.
Mhm.
So if you break down all of the things that are within the IRA, there's supposed to be stuff coming to every single state.
Mhm.
So who out there is doing the analysis to help folks understand like what's coming, what is supposed to be coming to me? My tax dollars are paying for X and Y and Z. What should be coming back to me? And then as you see those things, holding the legislators that are your legislators, because
Can you say that one more time? Say it one more time for the people in the back and the front
holding
and the
the
middle.
legislators who are your legislators, you employ them through how you vote for them, holding them accountable for the kinds of investments that you expect to see coming. And then that isn't just your federal legislatures, it's your state legislators as well. Everybody has to be in the mix.
Again. Not just your federal, your who?
Not just your federal, but your state. Everybody has a role to play. And like when people want to point fingers like you didn't do it, you didn't, like all you should have been doing it. All of us should have been doing it because you're using my tax dollars and I am employing you through my vote to do things for me as a citizen, because I am a citizen, a taxpaying citizen.
And you know how then they come for their tax money, okay? Because especially America, ain't that where we get most of our income? Anyway, I'm gonna let that one go.
It's almost April 15th. Like, is they done or is they not? Have you filed your extension already? I'm sorry.
Like I just got mine in.
But like, we have investments that are coming. There's ways to lower energy costs. There are up to $10,000 available in tax credits per household that's coming. So what are your state programs doing to make sure that they have brought in those federal dollars and are ready to go? And if there are opportunities to be employed in these state programs, like why not go work for the regulatory body for your state? Why not work for a solar company that's employing people? Why not be an accountant for some of the folks who are trying to put together programs that help us get from A to Z? I say this because people are very intent on like ideas. Ideas are magical. They motivate people, but at the end of the day, you have to implement those ideas, and implementing those ideas requires a certain amount of process. Yes, does that make people's eyes want to glaze over and fall asleep? Absolutely, but you know what? It's not a simple credit card transaction. And what do you have to do to get from A to Z?
Or as my son would say, just use Apple Pay, mommy, just use Apple Pay.
Ma'am. Or the way my daughter would be like, well, can't you just order it on Amazon? I could, but I'm not going to because you don't need it. These children,
these not the same kids.
They're not.
They're
not. Because you know, did you get that? I ain't got no McDonald's money. I ain't got no McDonald's money. Bruh.
Hold on. How about I didn't have no McDonald's money. How about my son wanted some In-N-Out? I said, well, I ain't got no In-N-Out money. He talking about something. No, you spent all of our money. You are so irresponsible. And did. So I tell the Hypes, right? I'm like, no, I tell the Hypes, he got me messed up because he got at me about his In-N-Out money. Why the Hypes send him In-N-Out money?
The aunties and uncles were like, we got you, babe.
What? Got at me like, get that baby his In-N-Out. I mean, that little boy had In-N-Out money for a month, okay?
They were like, we got you. We got you. Fine. Okay, get him, but also get the rest of us.
Like, I don't got no job.
So bad at it, but I'm not, because I get it. Like, because they've connected to you. You know, they've connected to your platform, they've connected to your voice, they've connected to like what you are able to help them understand. And that's a thing of beauty. And they're like, we got your little person because you got us. And I love that. I love that you have formed community in that way. Even if I will absolutely clown the aunties and uncles for giving him In-N-Out money, I love what it symbolizes in terms of being in community with you.
I want you to share with the hypes, what are some of your biggest concerns regarding our climate today? And, what can we look forward to if we don't continue to take action to push forward and have progress?
So the thing is that like the climate is already changing.
Mhm.
And so if we don't take action, if we don't essentially use this historic climate law 2022, if we don't use that as a platform to help give ourselves effective, like an effective fighting chance because of all of this investment that's flowing, you know, there are stronger storms coming. There are more intense wildfires coming. There is more variability within our climate that's coming. Because if you think back over your life, as I look back, you think back, how many huge storms do you feel like you remember in recent memory versus when you were a kid? Now, yes, you might not have been the news junkie that you are now, but things feel different. And that's because they are different. There's a level of intensity that's happening across so many different areas that like we have to do our part. Because it's not just what the US does. Like climate change is a global challenge, which requires global action. And there are some people who use that as an excuse to not act because they're like, but you aren't doing it.
Mm,
Guess what? That's not how we're going to get through this.
mm.
We have to do the kinds of things that help give us a fighting chance to like improve the situation. Otherwise, it's gonna get worse, y'all. Um, and nobody wants that.
I
Nobody
tell
wants
you,
that.
it didn't already got worse because all I remember was El Nino, and now El Nino is El Adulto with a granny and some kids and stuff.
And aren't y'all sliding into the Pacific? Like,
Back in the day, we know for our earthquakes, and we ain't never had so many back-to-back earthquakes out here in California.
so it's the earthquakes plus the rains, plus more rains, plus the fires, plus some other thing. Yeah.
Like when I said hot girl summer, that's not what I was asking about.
No, nobody asked for this. Nobody asked for like burnt girl summer. Like, nah,
Okay.
nah. I mean, I do want Megan's knees, but I would have to work for them, and I will dip it like it's tepid at this point.
My knees, they not really on Megan. I probably got the end, little,
Sorry.
but I still want to participate in Hot Girl Summer. But I would appreciate if I could keep my edges while I was doing it. I got faux C hair, okay, and
And
you know,
and we like to not burn. Like that's really it.
it's
And
a
we just
real.
want to not burn.
I want to ask you something because you mentioned something earlier about everybody pointing fingers and blaming this, right? And then we also have a lot of non-believers, right, who don't believe in climate change or like, it's a hoax, right? And there's just all this misinformation, and I'm concerned particularly for our younger generation because they are
Mhm.
so impressionable,
Yeah.
and we're in a day and an age where they're just down and read whatever somebody may kind of, ooh, it's okay, we're gonna make it work. Whatever somebody may kind of have told them on the internet, they're gonna believe it.
Yeah.
So since we got the doctor in here, okay, she got some letters behind her name. She did the research, she did the work, okay. I'm sure it was some footnotes and all kind of stuff in that. Can you lace our boots a little bit and like what message would you like to send to the younger generation about one, how to use like their voices and
Mhm.
their platforms to help with climate change? I want to start with that. And then two, like about where they can find more information to
Mhm.
put them up on game about what's really going on, with our climate, since
Yeah.
they seem to not believe with their own two eyes sometimes.
I mean, first, like, believe what you're seeing. Think about the individual first. Like, believe what you're seeing, believe what you're observing. Make your own notes. There's this great article that I was reading that was like more about taking note of when you see the trees start to bloom And it's your own notes and it's your own journal. Because I mean, aren't the children also like walking outside to touch grass? Well, then shouldn't you be taking note of when the grass decides to bloom and then when it decides to turn brown? Because California is well known for like the grass turns brown because like we ain't watering it all the time because there's
We ain't
like
got enough water.
ain't enough water. But like making note of these actual changes tangibly and like actually connecting them viscerally is a thing that people can do that helps them just feel more connected. But you know, the environmental NGOs have a lot to say. There's lots of different papers on their websites. More of them are on social media as well. And like if you go watch stuff, why not engage in some of the content that is actually being put out by reputable sources as opposed to some of the other stuff?
Mm.
I'm just saying, there are choices that you can make to tweak your algorithm if that is part of your life. Because I know that my algorithm, I've deleted a whole bunch of things. I'm just like, oh, no, none of this. How they show up, not just in protests, but when it's time to be part of the accountability mechanism. I know I've said this over and over again, but I love seeing folks show up at their town councils and their state legislatures for progressive things related to the environment. Yes, you can march on Washington, but you can also engage at all of the levels. But again, it's also not just about your singular idea that you have to save. Lots of people, as I've said, have wonderful ideas. How are they joining forces and actually making progress on those ideas and ideals? Because if you're just a lone voice in the wilderness by yourself, did you miss the part of kindergarten where you were supposed to make friends? You need friends. You need people.
Yeah.
And joining into a larger cause as opposed to atomizing into, well, I have my own NGO and I have my, okay, but what are y'all actually doing and what impact are you having? And how are you using whatever platform you think you're creating to uplift others and not just be the person in front of the stage? Like this is the problem that I have with American culture, that it like the vaunting of the individual. I used to, when I was running like university programs, I would talk about how like just because somebody's on the cover of Wired does not mean that they did all of those things by themselves. They did not. There are entire teams of people brought together around any number of different issues. And so if you can't find it within yourself to team up with other people, I need you to search your soul about why. Because if you're passionate about protecting the environment and you can't find nobody else to be in that with you, make different choices about how you conduct yourself. I'm just saying.
Laced us up. You laced us up.
But if you really want people to get their voices out there, you want them to essentially ask their state leaders to take full advantage of all the federal dollars that are out there. Because the same thing that happened around healthcare and Medicaid expansion, those same things will happen around these issues. They will play the same games. And people like a quarterback who shall remain nameless in Mississippi will get a stadium built on dollars that should have been going to our communities. How does that make any sense? It doesn't. So making sure that their state leaders are taking full advantage of all the federal money that is out there, like that is part of what we need folks to do. Directing the energy utilities to triple the renewable energy development. The energy utilities are making decisions about how to get renewable energy onto the grid. How are we holding our public utilities accountable? How are we holding our energy companies accountable for the mix of energies they produce that come into our homes? We want to see charging stations expanded for electric vehicles. What is the point of having we don't name any brands here. We're gonna leave all that out. what is the point of having an electric vehicle if you can't charge it?
Mm.
I could tell you an entire story about me, an electric vehicle, and a Beyonce concert, but we don't have time for that right now.
I'm gonna call you later. I need that story.
But it was in Kansas City, and like how like making sure there was enough charge to be found was a thing. So making sure that these charging stations that are promised are coming. Who are the companies that are supposed to be installing them? How are we holding them accountable? Who are their shareholders? Are they just like raking up money and just sitting on it and not doing things? We still want to reduce our energy bills by expanding energy efficiency and weatherization. There are organizations out there that are doing it. Have you made sure that your elderly neighbors in your urban environments have taken advantage of these kinds of things as well? That's a way to be in community with people. Intergenerational community is a thing that I feel like we have lost. And this is another way to think about like how can we care for one another? It's not just in health terms, but also in environmental terms. Like how can we care for one another? But then, holding accountable the folks that say they're going to bring new clean energy jobs to your state legislatures and your national legislators were like, hey, these jobs were coming. Are you showing up at their town hall meetings and asking them where they are? Do you know where your tax dollars have gone?
Mm, mm. She
I'm
ain't
just,
got business. She ain't got business.
I'm just saying. Because like I said, I don't have to name any names, but we know exactly who I'm talking about in terms of people who be like, yeah, these things are coming to my state. You voted against them.
Mm.
Okay.
And that's on period and a small check. Well, Dr. Jones, it has been an honor and a pleasure to kick it with you today. I've had so much fun.
I
We're
have
gonna
too.
close it. Which I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I've had fun too. This been
I'm glad. Like, look, thank you so much for kicking in with the hype today. Okay, we're just so grateful to just have been blessed with your presence and your expertise. It's really been an honor. Before I close it out, I just want to give you the floor for your last, anything else you want to share with us. But this the caveat. This the caveat.
mm-hmm.
So my catchphrase is okay, so boom. That's how I start all my content. So for your closing words, you got to start it off with, okay, so boom.
Lord. Ooh. Okay, so boom. What I need you all to do is find the way to connect within your community to hold folks accountable around all of the things that are promised to us because our tax dollars, ours, go forth and snatch.
And one thing we don't play about around here at the Hypes, we don't play about our shmoney.
And shouldn't. Seems like nobody else does. Why should we?
Again.
I mean, is they giving your child money for In-N-Out Burger?
And they was for real. They told me up about that In-N-Out. Okay, they was like, get our baby some In-N-Out. I'm like, okay, y'all lucky I'm one of these new parents, because my mama would have been like, what I'm gonna do is pay this bill before you be in and out this house with no lights on.
But somebody somewhere would have asked him, did she get you In-N-Out? And he would have told.
And that's exactly why I recorded the whole from the car to the order to him in our burger, because the hype stay was gonna check. They did check.
So if they can hold you accountable, they can hold their federal legislators and state legislators accountable. Like, look, okay, so boom. If y'all can hold AB accountable, you can hold all these other people up the chain accountable for your tax dollars that you're paying to protect your environment. There it is.
Look. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for just giving me your time and for having fun with us today. I love you. I told you we home girls now, girls. So we,